September 3, 1944. Forward American radar outpost, northern France. The blast shutters rattled as two U.S. radar technicians dove aside, yelling for the gunner to move. A streak of metallic silver tore across the treeline. Too fast, too low, too silent for anything the radar trailer behind them could mark. The scope operators slammed their palms onto consoles, adjusting frequencies, sweeping grids, shouting vector codes that meant nothing because the signal flickered, vanished, reappeared, then dropped again. On the sandbagged platform above them, the American gunner didn't wait for numbers. He already had the mirror scope pressed against his cheek. Two mechanics stared in disbelief as he leaned forward over the M2-mounted hybrid weapon, an improvised optical device built from scavenged fragments, a bomber crash rearview panel, a broken Aldous ring, and the polished circular disc from a wrecked P-61's cockpit mirror. It looked ridiculous, fragile, backward, suicidal. But the gunner's breathing stayed calm. Below him, dust erupted as an unseen German reconnaissance aircraft screamed past the tree line again, its reflection catching a microscopic ripple of sunlight in the mirror's bent glass. Nobody else saw it. Nobody else could. Except him. He moved before anyone shouted a bearing. A violent burst tore out of the barrel. Casings rained down the platform. Every technician ducked. One screamed for him to stop firing blindly. The radar trailer couldn't see a target. The spotters couldn't see a target. Only he could. A second later, smoke unfurled where no one expected it, far behind the treeline, above a thin strip of road. A black smear bent sideways in the distance, trailing fire. One enemy aircraft down. And not a single man around him understood how he had seen it. Not yet. Because this was only the first of many shots he was about to make. Shots he shouldn't have been able to take. Shots that radar, mathematics, and protocol all said were impossible. Shots that would make even veteran pilots stop and stare. Shots that would rewrite the rules of air-ground coordination forever. The American gunner lifted his head slowly, the mirror scope catching faint shards of broken sunlight as if mocking everyone who'd called it a joke. Someone behind him finally whispered the words the outpost would repeat for decades. Okay, what the hell just happened? By September 1944, the Allied advance across northern France was pushing deeper into occupied territory. The liberation of Paris had passed, yet German forces maintained pockets of fierce resistance, relying on reconnaissance and rapid air strikes to slow the American push. Control of the skies was critical. Every aircraft, every radar blip, could tip the balance between a successful advance and a devastating ambush. The U.S. Army Air Forces had deployed forward radar outposts alongside infantry units to detect enemy aircraft before they could strike. These stations, often hastily constructed on elevated terrain or among ruined villages, were fragile yet vital. They relied on a combination of equipment, human calculation, and intuition. But in the chaos of war, radar often failed to account for the most cunning and unexpected threats. German pilots understood the limitations of Allied detection. They executed low-level strafing runs, weaving through tree lines and using terrain to mask their approach. The Bf-109s and FW-190s, especially in small reconnaissance detachments, exploited gaps in radar coverage, striking before the Americans could react. Those who survived such encounters often relied on visual observation alone, but even the most trained spotters could miss an aircraft at the edge of detection. In this environment, Sergeant Walter Hayes, a radar gunner newly assigned to the northern France sector, brought an unconventional approach. Unlike many of his peers who relied strictly on instruments, he trusted a combination of instinct and a peculiar optical contraption, his mirror scope. Built from salvaged parts, the device allowed him to detect subtle reflections and movements invisible to standard scopes. Many of his comrades laughed at it. Commanders questioned its reliability. Yet Hayes had honed it under fire, proving time and again that intuition combined with ingenuity could outperform technology. Previous missions had demonstrated both the fragility and brilliance of American detection methods. Radar could locate a formation of bombers, but a single aircraft skimming tree lines or moving at precise angles often disappeared from the grid. Hayes recognized patterns invisible to operators. A glint on a wingtip, a shadow cast across a hedge, the ripple of heat above a sunlit field. These cues allowed him to predict flight paths with remarkable accuracy. The unit around Hayes relied on strict procedures, triangulation between radar operators, communication with observation posts, and pre-programmed firing zones. Yet the unpredictability of German reconnaissance flights demanded more than procedure. The combination of intuition, experience, and a willingness to take measured risks became the defining factor in survival and effectiveness. Even within the small radar outpost, tension was constant. The technicians and infantry below could hear every engine, every whine of distant propellers, but often couldn't act until it was too late. Their trust in Hayes' mirrorscope was tentative at best. He, however, had developed an acute understanding of how enemy pilots adapted to conventional radar. They expected detection, anticipated counterfire, and relied on blind spots. Exploiting those blind spots required not speed, but vision, both literal and mental. By the morning of September 3rd, reconnaissance had intensified. German aircraft moved with deliberate stealth, and the American outpost's radar flickered inconsistently, leaving gaps in coverage. Every missed blip represented risk: strafing of supply lines, disruption of troop movements, or casualties among artillery units. Hayes' mirrorscope would be tested under the most extreme conditions. The result of that day would not only affect immediate operations but also offer a glimpse into the evolving nature of air-ground coordination in modern warfare. As the first Bf-109s began low passes across open fields, Hayes adjusted his mirrorscope once again, scanning for the almost invisible signs of movement. The outpost's radar screens flickered uselessly. His instinct, honed through months of observation, guided his aim. Every second counted. Every observation mattered. Failure would be immediate. Success would defy every expectation the unit had about detection, precision, and the limitations of technology. The stage was set. Northern France was alive with danger, yet Hayes was ready. In a world dominated by instruments and protocol, one gunner armed with ingenuity and audacity was about to prove that even the most sophisticated radar could be outmatched by skill, observation, and daring improvisation. By mid-morning, the skies above northern France were deceptively calm. Infantry units advanced cautiously through open farmland and ruined villages, unaware of how close danger could approach from above. German reconnaissance planes moved with surgical precision, skimming treetops, darting between low clouds, and exploiting the smallest gaps in radar coverage. Each run was designed to test American readiness, provoke a response, and gather intelligence without risking engagement. The radar outpost was a fragile sentinel in this environment. Cables and antennas jutted from hastily reinforced platforms. Operators peered at flickering screens while shouts and warning bells competed with the drone of distant engines. For most, the instruments were the sole measure of safety, dictating every action, every burst of gunfire, every alert. Yet in the midst of this reliance, Sergeant Hayes had learned to see what the instruments could not. His mirrorscope, initially dismissed as a novelty, became an extension of perception. Tiny reflections, almost imperceptible, revealed aircraft that radar failed to register. A glint on a wing, the ripple of sunlight across a control surface, even the subtle shadow shifting over farmland. These cues allowed Hayes to anticipate movement, trajectory, and intent. While colleagues followed protocol, he relied on experience and observation honed under constant threat. Each approach was different, unpredictable. The German pilots, confident in the superiority of their evasive techniques, assumed that altitude, speed, and stealth would conceal them. But Hayes' method countered these assumptions. He had studied angles, distances, timing, and enemy behavior in prior engagements. By integrating these variables into real-time observation, he transformed uncertainty into actionable precision. The American outpost was not alone. Nearby units depended on its reports for advance warnings, supply protection, and coordination of anti-aircraft fire. A single miscalculation could expose columns of men, convoys of trucks, or artillery emplacements to devastating strafing. Hayes understood the stakes. Unlike the radar operators who responded to blips, he anticipated motion, translating subtle visual cues into immediate, precise action. His fellow soldiers watched with a mix of skepticism and awe. Some considered the mirror scope nothing more than a gimmick. Others, having witnessed previous successful engagements, offered quiet approval. Hayes himself had long since abandoned the need for validation. He worked in silence, letting results speak louder than explanation. At 10:47 a.m., the first low-flying Bf-109 appeared, darting just above the hedgerows. Radar screens flickered, then lost the signal entirely. Panic rippled through the outpost, but Hayes remained focused. One glint on the fuselage caught his eye, reflected in the curved mirror. He adjusted his aim instinctively, breathing controlled, hands steady. In a single calculated burst, the first enemy plane erupted in smoke, trailing flames that etched across the horizon. This success was only the beginning. More aircraft approached in irregular formations, testing every method the Americans employed. Conventional protocols, calculations, and triangulations were rendered nearly useless. Hayes, relying solely on the mirror scope, continued to track, target, and fire, repeatedly neutralizing aircraft before the radar could register a warning. By noon, the results were unmistakable. Enemy reconnaissance efforts were disrupted. Columns of German aircraft had been forced to retreat or fly at altitudes and vectors that rendered their missions less effective. Hayes' actions not only protected immediate units but demonstrated the potential of human observation to surpass technology when applied with skill, creativity, and courage. In the larger context of the Northern France campaign, this moment was more than a tactical success. It signaled the evolving nature of air-ground coordination, the impact of ingenuity on battlefield outcomes, and the potential for individual skill to challenge assumptions about technological superiority. One gunner, armed with a mirror and determination, was rewriting the rules of engagement in real time. The next wave of aircraft approached silently, skimming the farmland, their engines a faint hiss over the distant chatter of infantry. Sergeant Hayes adjusted the mirror scope, pressing it closer to his eye, breathing slow and steady. Every reflex, every micro-movement, had been honed through weeks of observation, countless sorties, and relentless calculation under fire. The gunner's hands moved almost mechanically, yet with deliberate purpose. Each flick of the wrist, each twist of the scope, accounted for angle, distance, and speed. The Bf-109s dipped and climbed, testing conventional detection limits, but Hayes anticipated every trajectory. He could read an enemy pilot's intentions before the instruments could, a skill that rendered radar almost redundant in these moments. Below him, the outpost technicians leaned forward, squinting at flickering screens, shouting coordinates that seemed to lag behind reality. One by one, planes were neutralized before radar could lock on. The controlled bursts of the gunner were invisible artistry, timed, precise, and lethal. Each target fell as if predicted, leaving trails of smoke curling into the sky, a testament to skill over technology. The Americans observed, tension mixed with awe. The gunner's audacity was striking, not reckless, but calculated. He took risks no one else would, moving the P-51's targeting platform with subtle shifts, aligning shots that required split-second timing. Even the smallest miscalculation would have exposed him or missed the fleeting target. Yet his instincts guided him flawlessly. Enemy behavior itself became predictable to Hayes. Repetition in their maneuvers, the way they banked too early, the rhythm of their turns, the imperceptible pause before a dive, created opportunities invisible to radar. Each motion was a signal, each shift an invitation. The mirror scope translated reflections into actionable intelligence, turning subtle cues into lethal action. The mechanical reliability of the P-51 amplified the effect. Stable, powerful, and responsive, the aircraft responded instantly to minor adjustments, allowing the gunner to concentrate entirely on observation and timing. The machine was an extension of his perception. Together they became a single instrument of precision. Time itself seemed distorted during these sequences. Seconds stretched, yet compressed. The mind measured intervals in heartbeats and micro-adjustments rather than minutes. 4 planes approached simultaneously, by all conventional metrics, a challenge too great to neutralize. But Hayes adjusted, fired, and scored each kill with near-impossible accuracy. The human dimension was evident in the smallest details. Sweat dripping onto the scope, eyes narrowing to catch a glint, the pulse steady despite adrenaline surging. Every movement carried consequence, every decision life or death. Yet amidst the chaos, Hayes operated with calm, almost unnatural focus. Psychology played a subtle but essential role. German pilots, unaware of how he tracked them, began hesitating, correcting prematurely, flinching at imaginary threats. The gunner's audacity imposed a new reality. He dictated the tempo of the engagement. Enemy formations fragmented under pressure, creating new targets and openings. The 4-minute engagement unfolded like a calculated dance. Each burst, each micro-adjustment, each lead correction was precise, almost surgical. Observers noted the fluidity, the synchronization between man, machine, and environment. It was a masterclass in anticipating motion, exploiting weakness, and executing risk with precision. By the time the first wave of enemy planes was neutralized, the outpost had witnessed the extraordinary potential of one individual. The radar, protocols, and standard procedures had been rendered secondary to the combination of intuition, technical skill, and audacity. Hayes had proven that ingenuity, when applied with discipline, could outperform technology and challenge conventional wisdom. The second wave of German aircraft approached with tighter formation, moving lower to evade radar detection. The whine of their engines was faint, almost drowned by the hum of the outpost generators. Sergeant Hayes lifted the mirror scope to his eye, catching a glint of sunlight reflecting off a wingtip, a signal invisible to instruments but perfectly clear to him. He adjusted instantly. The slightest tilt of the mirror, the smallest rotation of the scope, translated into precise targeting data. Each target was anticipated before it fully entered the visual field. Every burst of fire accounted for speed, altitude, wind, and the subtle shift of aircraft in formation. These calculations happened almost instinctively, a product of experience, observation, and deep familiarity with both his own platform and enemy behavior. The Americans around him watched in silent awe. The radar screens blinked uselessly, the technicians shouted coordinates that came too late. Hayes' actions demonstrated that technology, while powerful, had limitations. Human skill, when trained, honed, and daring, could surpass machines in specific critical moments. The enemy pilots were experienced, confident, and aggressive. They adjusted patterns, attempted evasive maneuvers, and sought to exploit what they perceived as gaps. Yet the gunner's anticipation countered every tactic. He observed micro-adjustments in their flight path, the subtle wobble of a wing, the almost imperceptible hesitation in a bank, the trajectory correction before a dive. Each motion revealed vulnerability. Each reflection in the mirror scope became an actionable opportunity. The rhythm of engagement intensified. Bursts of machine gun fire tore through the sky, each strike deliberate, controlled, and deadly. Smoke plumes spiraled from damaged aircraft, trails of destruction marking the effectiveness of Hayes' unconventional targeting method. 4 planes neutralized before radar could register any warning, proof that his audacity was not reckless, but precise, controlled, and profoundly effective. Coordination within the squadron complemented the gunner's skill. Aircraft below maintained formation, adjusting subtly to prevent friendly fire while maximizing the gunner's field of vision. Communication was minimal, movement, timing, and trust guided every decision. The human dimension was evident. Instinct and training merged into seamless action. The psychological impact on the enemy was immediate. Hesitation replaced confidence. Aggression became cautious maneuvering. Their formation fragmented under pressure, leaving openings for rapid neutralization. One by one, the planes succumbed to precise bursts, each kill reinforcing the effect on surviving pilots. Fear, anticipation, and uncertainty dictated the tempo of the engagement more than strategy or numbers. Mechanical reliability of the P-51 amplified Hayes' effectiveness. Responsive controls, stable targeting platform, and optimal armament allowed him to focus entirely on the mirror scope, observation, and timing. The gunner's skill and the aircraft's precision merged into a single lethal system, executing a tactic that would later be analyzed as groundbreaking in air-ground coordination. Time seemed suspended. Each fraction of a second contained decisions that could determine life or death. Hayes operated at the limit of perception and reaction, translating visual cues into calculated, devastating action. The environment, enemy behavior, and machine performance became one continuous flow, and he moved within it with uncanny precision. By the end of the second wave, 8 enemy planes had been destroyed. The outpost staff, initially skeptical, now understood the extraordinary potential of one man, one mirror scope, and the disciplined application of skill. Conventional expectations had been shattered. Technology alone could not replicate the vision, intuition, and audacity demonstrated in those moments. The stage was set for the decisive conclusion. Only 4 enemy aircraft remained in the immediate engagement, and the airspace above northern France would witness a final demonstration of extraordinary precision, courage, and ingenuity. The remaining 4 Bf-109s approached with wary aggression, banking sharply to test the gunner's reaction. Engines hummed like a coiled spring ready to snap, slicing through the tense quiet of the northern France sky. Sergeant Hayes adjusted the mirror scope, every muscle taut, every thought focused on the tiny reflections dancing across the glass. One plane dipped low, hugging the treeline, attempting to exploit perceived blind spots. Hayes anticipated the trajectory instantly. He twisted the mirror slightly, angling it to catch the sun's reflection off a wing. A controlled burst tore through the air. Smoke erupted from the enemy fighter, its fuselage twisting violently as it spiraled toward the hedgerows below. Another aircraft banked left in a desperate maneuver, flanking toward the outpost. The gunner predicted the intercept vector within fractions of a second. The P-51 shuddered under the recoil of successive bursts. Tracers stitched invisible lines across the sky, each round meticulously timed. The enemy plane shuddered, then disintegrated midair, leaving a twisting trail of fire against the monochrome sky. The third fighter tried to dive beneath cloud cover, relying on speed and concealment to evade detection. Hayes adjusted instantly, accounting for altitude, velocity, and wind drift. The mirror scope revealed a glint, a tiny flash of reflected light on the aircraft's tail. A burst of fire met the target with perfect timing. Smoke spiraled, flames licked upward, and the fighter tumbled uncontrollably, disintegrating before it could reach cover. The last Bf-109 hesitated, the psychological toll of losing 3 comrades in moments visible on every micromovement. Hayes recognized the subtle cues, flinches, early corrections, and half-hearted evasive banking. He exploited them without hesitation. A final, precise burst struck the fuselage, tearing the aircraft apart midair. The 4-minute engagement culminated in absolute control over the skies. Below, the outpost technicians and infantry stared silently. Radar screens flickered impotently. The mirror scope, a device previously mocked, had dictated the pace, timing, and outcome of the engagement. 12 enemy fighters neutralized with audacious precision, 8 in previous waves, and 4 in the decisive finale. Hayes leaned back slightly, breathing even but deliberate. The P-51, his instrument and partner, glinted under the faint sunlight breaking through residual clouds. Smoke trails spiraled into the horizon, a visual record of calculated skill overcoming numbers, technology, and expectation. The squadron maintained formation, covering the outpost and each other. There was no elation, only a quiet, shared understanding. What had just occurred would be analyzed for decades as a demonstration of precision, anticipation, and audacity. The airspace, momentarily chaotic, now belonged unequivocally to the Americans. The psychological impact on surviving enemy pilots was immediate. Confidence had fractured, hesitation and fear replaced aggression. The rules of engagement, unspoken until that moment, had changed. A single gunner, using a mirror and intuition, had dictated the tempo of battle, neutralizing threats that conventional systems deemed undetectable. By the end of the engagement, Hayes' outpost had not only secured immediate air superiority but had illustrated a fundamental lesson. In modern warfare, human ingenuity, disciplined skill, and audacious execution could surpass technology, numbers, and protocol. The final Bf-109 spiraled violently from Hayes' calculated strike, black smoke trailing in the wind. Its wings flailed, and the engines stuttered before the aircraft collided with the hedgerows below. Silence hung briefly over the battlefield, broken only by the hum of the P-51's engine and the distant echo of artillery fire. Hayes exhaled slowly, keeping the mirrorscope trained as the last streak of movement faded from view. Every other plane had been accounted for, 12 enemy aircraft eliminated in 4 minutes. The radar outpost, once a center of tense anticipation, now seemed almost mundane. The instruments, blinking and chirping, had served little purpose compared to one man's vision, judgment, and precise timing. The squadron regrouped in formation, engines humming in measured rhythm. Pilots exchanged brief nods, their silence heavy with understanding. There had been no spectacle, no fanfare. The engagement was purely a demonstration of disciplined skill and calculated audacity, yet its consequences would resonate far beyond northern France. Enemy reconnaissance had been neutralized, the airspace was secure. Strategic planners noted the effect immediately. Supply convoys could advance, infantry could maneuver with reduced risk, and forward operations could proceed under the protection of temporary air superiority. What one gunner had achieved in minutes could have taken entire squadrons' hours under conventional doctrine. Mechanics and support personnel on the ground moved cautiously, ensuring the P-51 remained operational. Every burst fired, every maneuver executed, was a testament to human skill integrated with mechanical reliability. The aircraft had responded flawlessly to micro-adjustments, enabling Hayes to execute maneuvers that would have been impossible in lesser platforms. Psychologically, the engagement left an imprint. German pilots, who survived or observed from a distance, reconsidered assumptions. Tactics based on speed, stealth, and surprise were no longer sufficient. Even the most seasoned aviators recognized the limits of conventional training when confronted by audacious ingenuity combined with precision. Hesitation, doubt, and caution replaced aggression and confidence. The American outpost filed immediate reports, documenting the engagement, the method, and the results. Analysts marveled at the effectiveness of the mirrorscope, the coordination between human observation and machine response, and the rapid neutralization of multiple high-value targets. The 4-minute engagement would serve as a benchmark for tactical study and future doctrine. For Hayes, the moment was calm but monumental. Sweat streaked his uniform, his hands ached from micro-adjustments, yet the significance of what had occurred resonated quietly within him. The engagement had proven that audacity, skill, and observation could outweigh numbers, technology, and expectation. One individual had reshaped the battle in real time, demonstrating principles that would influence air-ground coordination and tactical doctrine for years to come. Above the northern French countryside, smoke curled upward from destroyed enemy aircraft, twisting into ghostly reminders of audacity and precision. The skies, temporarily dominated by American forces, carried the memory of those 4 minutes, the rhythm of controlled bursts, the reflection of sunlight off a mirror, the decisive control of a single gunner. As Hayes disengaged from the mirror scope, scanning for any remaining threats, the reality settled in. The engagement was complete. 12 enemy fighters destroyed, none of his squadron lost. Air superiority had been asserted. The balance of tactical power, momentarily, had shifted. And in that shift lay a clear lesson. Disciplined ingenuity, applied under pressure, could reshape the rules of engagement forever. The smoke of the downed aircraft lingered over the fields like a silent witness to what had just transpired. Within the American outpost, technicians exhaled collectively, the tension slowly giving way to realization. 12 enemy fighters neutralized in 4 minutes, a feat no protocol had anticipated, no radar could fully capture, and no human observer had believed possible before that morning. Reports were filed meticulously. Observers detailed every movement, every glint of reflected light, every calculated burst fired from Hayes' mirror scope. Commanders at the sector headquarters pored over the data, recognizing that conventional doctrines had been challenged. The success of a single gunner had rendered established assumptions about detection, engagement, and risk obsolete in certain conditions. Morale surged quietly among the squadron. Pilots, mechanics, and radar operators absorbed the lesson. Disciplined skill could surpass numbers and technology. Conversations were subdued but charged with respect. Hayes' audacity became a benchmark, demonstrating how preparation, intuition, and rapid judgment could decisively influence an engagement. Enemy reconnaissance had suffered immediate consequences. German pilots who survived the encounter reported disruptions to formations and hesitation in tactics. The psychological impact was profound. Hesitation replaced confidence, and aggression was tempered by the fear of invisible, anticipatory precision. The outpost's temporary air superiority would ripple across the operational theater, facilitating advances in troop movement, supply lines, and ground coordination. Mechanics examined the P-51 that had borne Hayes through the engagement, noting the reliability and responsiveness that had enabled such precision. The aircraft had performed flawlessly, its engineering complementing human skill to form a cohesive, lethal system. Every micro-adjustment, every rapid correction, was executed with mechanical precision, amplifying the effectiveness of Hayes' observational talent. Within the radar outpost, the human element became unmistakable. Observers realized that intuition, honed through repeated exposure and calculated risk-taking, could achieve results beyond the capacity of instruments alone. Hayes' calm, deliberate movements under pressure had guided the engagement, demonstrating the essential balance between human perception and mechanical support. Analysts began to quantify the broader impact. Supply convoys, previously at risk of disruption by low-flying reconnaissance planes, could advance with reduced threat. Forward infantry movements gained confidence, relying on the knowledge that skies above were effectively monitored and defended. The 4-minute engagement had created a temporary but decisive shift in operational control, extending far beyond the immediate destruction of enemy aircraft. Hayes' colleagues absorbed the significance. It was not merely the number of planes destroyed, but the method and precision that would influence future tactics. Lessons drawn would inform doctrine, training protocols, and operational strategies, emphasizing anticipation, controlled risk, and observation over blind reliance on instruments. The northern France skies, still streaked with smoke from the downed Bf-109s, stood as a testament to what could be achieved when human skill and mechanical reliability were fused. Hayes had imposed a new reality on the battlefield. One individual, acting with audacity and precision, could reshape the engagement and challenge expectations, proving that ingenuity and discipline could redefine the rules of modern warfare. By evening, the full scope of the morning's engagement became clear to both American and German command. Reports, meticulously compiled from the radar outpost and squadron logs, confirmed the extraordinary achievement: 12 Bf-109s eliminated in 4 minutes. Analysts and instructors alike began dissecting the event, recognizing that one gunner's skill, combined with unconventional observation tools, had produced results far beyond expectation. The effect on squadron morale was profound. Pilots who had approached engagements cautiously now operated with a new confidence, inspired by what one individual had accomplished. Observation posts, radar technicians, and infantry alike came to respect the capability of human skill when applied decisively. Call signs and murmured acknowledgments circulated quietly. Hayes' mirrorscope had become a symbol of ingenuity and audacity. Enemy reconnaissance suffered both immediate and lasting consequences. Surviving pilots reported hesitation in maneuvers, increased caution in flanking attempts, and reluctance to engage at lower altitudes. Psychological ripples altered tactics, forcing formations to tighten, reducing aggressiveness, and ultimately conceding initiative to the Americans. Hayes' actions had effectively rewritten enemy expectations in that sector. The strategic value of the engagement extended beyond the outpost. With temporary air superiority secured, Allied ground operations proceeded with reduced risk. Supply convoys advanced unimpeded, infantry maneuvered with greater confidence, and artillery units executed coordinated strikes without fear of interference from low-flying reconnaissance aircraft. The engagement became an unspoken template. One calculated display of skill could shape battlefield dynamics in ways previously thought impossible. Mechanically, the P-51 that carried Hayes proved exceptional. Its responsiveness, stability, and armament enabled near-instantaneous correction and precision targeting. This synergy between human skill and technological reliability was noted in post-engagement reports, influencing training programs and aircraft evaluation for months to follow. The mirror scope, once ridiculed, now represented innovation born of necessity, a reminder that ingenuity could challenge assumptions and overcome limitations of equipment and environment. Observers at the outpost documented every detail. Flight logs, photographs, and technical notes captured the 4-minute engagement in near real time. Analysts emphasized the human element. Hayes' anticipation, observation, and controlled bursts had dictated the rhythm of combat, outpacing conventional systems. The lesson was clear: human ingenuity could outmatch both numerical advantage and technology under the right conditions. Even weeks later, the northern France airspace bore the imprint of Hayes' engagement. Enemy pilots, aware of the event, adjusted tactics to avoid predictable vulnerabilities, but the American advantage persisted. Forward operations benefited from the precedent. One gunner's audacity had shown that discipline, skill, and observation could secure outcomes far greater than brute force alone. Ultimately, the engagement underscored a key principle of modern warfare: technology alone does not guarantee success. Human skill, creativity, and decisiveness are irreplaceable forces. Hayes had demonstrated that audacity, informed by training and observation, could decisively influence a battle, reshape tactics, and inspire confidence across units. The ripples of that 4-minute engagement would resonate for months, influencing doctrine, morale, and strategy far beyond the immediate theater of operations. In the quiet that followed, the northern France countryside seemed almost serene, yet the memory of 4 minutes of precise, audacious action lingered. Smoke from the downed Bf-109s twisted across the horizon, ghostly reminders of what one gunner had accomplished. Sergeant Hayes' mirrorscope, once mocked as a gimmick, had revealed the extraordinary potential of human skill under pressure, skill that technology alone could never replicate. The engagement had demonstrated a fundamental truth: audacity, observation, and disciplined precision could alter the course of battle. One man, armed with ingenuity and courage, had neutralized 12 enemy aircraft, protected supply lines, and influenced tactical outcomes far beyond his immediate environment. His actions reshaped both Allied and enemy perceptions, forcing pilots, commanders, and analysts to reconsider assumptions about numbers, instruments, and conventional tactics. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical destruction. German pilots hesitated where they once would have acted with confidence. American units gained a quiet but profound assurance that skill and audacity could tip the balance in moments of crisis. Hayes' calm determination under intense pressure became a symbol of human potential in warfare, proof that instinct, creativity, and careful risk-taking could achieve results once considered impossible. Beyond immediate tactical effects, the engagement influenced doctrine, training, and strategy. Observers and analysts noted the fusion of human skill and mechanical reliability, incorporating lessons from Hayes' method into broader operational planning. The 4 minutes of action became a case study in precision, anticipation, and innovation, showing how individuals could redefine the capabilities of entire units and even challenge established norms. Ultimately, the story of Sergeant Hayes and his mirrorscope stands as a reminder that in war, as in history, extraordinary outcomes often emerge from the convergence of human ingenuity and courage. One individual, acting with skill and daring, had rewritten the rules of engagement, leaving a legacy that would inspire pilots, gunners, and strategists for generations. The skies above northern France were silent once more, but the echoes of those 4 minutes endured, proof that precision, creativity, and audacity could change the course of battle, and perhaps, the course of history itself.